In the distant future, humanity had made its mark across the stars. Human colonies had spread to many planets, and humanity was now in a time of peace with most other species. Thomas, a young diplomat, had been traveling for years between human worlds, working tirelessly to ensure peace with the many alien species that humanity had encountered. He had built a reputation for being calm and determined, always seeking solutions to difficult problems. However, even with all his diplomatic skills, there was one challenge he had yet to overcome: his feelings for Princess Lyra, an alien princess from the planet Laria. Princess Lyra was unlike anyone Thomas had ever met. She was a member of a species known for their ancient wisdom and advanced technology. The Lyrian people were known to be powerful, their technology light years ahead of humanity's, but it was their commitment to peace and their unmatched intelligence that set them apart. Lyra, as the daughter of the king, held a position of great authority. Despite her royal status, she had always been kind, humble, and wise. Their first meeting had been during a peace summit, a gathering of diplomats from various species working to secure alliances for the future. Thomas had been chosen as the human representative, and Lyra had been there to speak on behalf of her people. As soon as Thomas had seen her, he was struck by her presence. There was something regal about her, but also something gentle. The way she spoke with such confidence and understanding left him in awe. Their conversations had been filled with debates over policies, agreements on trade, and agreements on how best to approach the challenges their species faced. Lyra's insights were always profound, and every time she spoke, Thomas felt himself drawn more and more to her. But he had kept his feelings hidden. He was a diplomat, and it wouldn't do to mix his personal emotions with his professional duties. He had to focus on his work, on the bigger picture of peace and unity. The summit had been long and exhausting, and by the time the final meeting was called, Thomas felt drained. His head was filled with thoughts of his people, the future of the galaxy, and the complex negotiations ahead. As the last of the day's discussions concluded, Thomas found himself standing alone on the observation deck of the space station where the summit had taken place. He gazed out at the stars, letting the silence of the moment wash over him. It was in this quiet solitude that Thomas spoke his heart aloud, without expecting anyone to hear. "I wish to wed her," he whispered to the stars. His words were soft, a simple thought born from the growing feelings inside him. He had never meant to speak them aloud, but in that moment, the desire to be close to Lyra was overwhelming. He wanted to be with her, not just as a diplomat, but as someone who could stand beside her, share her world, and understand the complexities of her life. For a moment, Thomas felt foolish for even thinking such thoughts. He was a human, and Lyra was an alien princess. How could such a relationship ever work? The differences between their species, their cultures, their ways of thinking. There was no way a union like that would ever be accepted. Yet, despite the logic in his mind, his heart couldn't let go of the idea. Suddenly, a soft voice broke through the stillness of the moment. "I accept," the voice said. Thomas's heart skipped a beat. He turned quickly, only to see Princess Lyra standing behind him. Her eyes were gentle, yet filled with a strength that Thomas had come to admire. She was not alone. Several other diplomats were milling around in the background, but Lyra had heard his words. She had heard him speak the wish he never meant to share. For a moment, Thomas was speechless. His mind was racing, and his thoughts were a blur. He had never expected Lyra to be standing there, and he certainly had not expected her to respond the way she had. You heard me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra nodded, her expression calm but unwavering. "I did." Thomas felt his heart pound in his chest. He didn't know what to say. How could he respond to something like this? He had never expected her to react this way. She had always been the composed, diplomatic figure so controlled in every situation. Yet here she was, responding to a quiet wish, a wish born from his heart and not his mind. "Are you serious?" Thomas finally managed to ask, still struggling to comprehend what was happening. Lyra stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his. I am. The simplicity of her answer only added to the confusion in Thomas's mind. She didn't seem to be joking, nor did she seem surprised by what he had said. It was as if she had been waiting for him to speak those words, as if she had known exactly what he wanted long before he had said it. For a long moment, they both stood there in silence, the stars twinkling above them, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. Finally, Thomas found his voice again. But how can this be? I am human. You are from a different species, a different culture. Our people are so different, he said, his voice filled with doubt. It's not possible. Lyra's eyes softened, and she took another step forward, closing the distance between them. What if it is possible? She asked, her voice gentle, but filled with a quiet strength. What if the differences between us are what make this union stronger? Thomas shook his head, trying to process what she was saying. But what about your people? The others in your court? They will never accept this. Lyra smiled, her expression both reassuring and confident. They may not understand at first, but they will see the truth in time. The truth that peace, understanding, and unity can be achieved despite our differences. And that is what matters most. Thomas couldn't help but feel a spark of hope in his chest. It was a small flicker, but it was enough to make him believe that perhaps this was not as impossible as he had thought. Perhaps there was a chance for something more, something greater than he had ever imagined. For the first time since he had met her, Thomas allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the dream he had kept hidden for so long was within his reach. But even as hope began to blossom in his heart, doubts lingered at the edges of his mind. Could their love truly survive in a galaxy so divided? Could a human and an alien princess overcome all the obstacles in their path? As Lyra reached out and gently touched his hand, her voice broke through his swirling thoughts once more. I've chosen you, Thomas. And together, we will face whatever challenges lie ahead. The future is uncertain, but with each other, we can make it brighter. And in that moment, for the first time in a long while, Thomas believed her. He believed in her words, in her strength, and in the possibility of their shared future. But what would the galaxy say? What would their people think of a union like theirs? Only time would tell. The days following Thomas's quiet wish were a blur of confusion and excitement. The union of a human diplomat and an alien princess had been something Thomas had never even dared to imagine. Yet here he was, standing at the edge of something so much bigger than himself, something he had not yet fully understood. After their unexpected conversation on the observation deck, Lyra had disappeared back into the diplomatic circles. The summit had continued without any major disruptions, but Thomas's thoughts were constantly on her. He tried to focus on his work, trying to go through the motions of the peace talks, but everything felt distant, as if the world around him had faded, and only Lyra's words echoed in his mind. I accept. The words were simple, yet they held so much weight. What did they mean? What had she truly meant? Could it be that she, too, felt something for him? Thomas had spent so many years with a professional mask on, always thinking of peace first and his emotions second. But with Lyra, everything was different. She was unlike any person he had ever met. Her intelligence, her grace, her power. She was a leader of her people, and yet she had accepted him without hesitation. It didn't make sense, and yet, as he walked the hallways of the station, every part of him longed to understand it. Days later, Thomas was summoned to meet with Lyra. She had requested a private conversation, away from the political chaos that surrounded the summit. His heart raced as he entered the room where she awaited him. It was simple, yet elegant, nothing grand or flashy, a reflection of Lyra herself. As Thomas stepped inside, Lyra stood by the window, gazing out into the vastness of space. Thomas, she said without turning, her voice calm and steady. I've been thinking about our conversation the other night. Thomas felt a lump form in his throat. He had known this moment would come. She was a princess, after all. And this union, if it was to become anything real, would have serious consequences. He couldn't help but feel that he wasn't prepared for what was to come. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. "And what have you been thinking?" he asked, his voice quiet. Lyra finally turned to face him, her eyes full of resolve. "I've been thinking about what this union means for both of us, for our people."
"This will not be easy, Thomas. I understand that.
"But I also believe in the possibility of what we can achieve together." She paused, as if carefully considering her next words. "I am not like other leaders, Thomas. I do not seek power for myself. I seek peace, understanding, and a future where all species can coexist. But this union, it will challenge everything we know about our worlds." Thomas nodded, his mind racing.
I know. I've been thinking about that too.
Our species, our cultures, they're so different. Can we really overcome that? Can we bridge that gap? Lyra walked toward him, her movements graceful.
We will have to.
And I believe we can. You and I are not just diplomats, Thomas.
We are individuals, and this is not just about our species or our people. It is about us. It's about trust, about understanding each other in ways that go beyond politics. But that does not mean it will be easy. Thomas felt a surge of emotion, a combination of hope and fear. What if this was the right thing? What if they could truly make it work? But then, the reality of their differences hit him again. The distance between their species, the way humans and aliens viewed the universe. How could they possibly understand each other completely? "I want to believe that," Thomas said softly.
"But I have to admit, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of what it might do to both of us. I'm only human."
"How can I stand beside you when I know that my people might not understand? And what about your people? What if they see us as a threat to your position?" Lyra smiled gently, her expression filled with kindness. That is the fear of every person who seeks change. Every revolution, every step forward, begins with fear. But we do not let that fear control us. You are not just human, Thomas. You are someone who sees beyond the surface, who understands the importance of peace. That is why I chose you. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch soft yet full of meaning. "I believe in you." Thomas swallowed hard. Her faith in him was overwhelming, but it also filled him with a sense of responsibility that he wasn't sure he was ready for. Could he live up to her expectations? Could he live up to what they both needed to make this work? Lyra's gaze softened as she stepped back slightly, sensing his uncertainty. "This is not just about us, Thomas. It's about showing that unity is possible, that love can exist between two different worlds. If we can show that, then perhaps others will follow our example." For a moment, Thomas stood in silence, trying to absorb her words. Then, a thought occurred to him. Perhaps this was the chance he had been waiting for. He had spent so long negotiating for peace between species, fighting for understanding. Yet he had never truly fought for something personal. And now, with Lyra, he saw the chance to not just represent peace but to live it, to be a part of something that could change the galaxy, something far more meaningful than just treaties and agreements. "You're right, Thomas," finally said, his voice filled with new determination. "We can show them what's possible. We can show them that peace isn't just a dream. It's something real. Something worth fighting for."
He looked at her with a mixture of admiration and affection.
"And if we can do that together, then I'll do whatever it takes."
Lyra smiled, the warmth in her eyes bringing a sense of comfort to Thomas. "I knew you would understand."
"I knew you would see what this can be." The conversation turned to practical matters then, discussing how to handle the public announcement of their engagement, the political fallout, and how best to navigate the complex galaxy they both inhabited.
But as they spoke, Thomas couldn't help but feel a sense of hope rising within him. There were still so many challenges ahead, so many obstacles they would have to face. But for the first time, he didn't feel alone. He felt as though, with Lyra by his side, anything was possible. The days that followed were filled with planning and discussions. Word of their engagement spread quickly, and reactions were mixed. Some of the more traditional members of the Galactic Council were outraged, unable to understand how a human could be worthy of such a powerful and intelligent being as Princess Lyra. But there were also those who saw the potential for unity, who believed that their union could pave the way for stronger alliances and a brighter future. As the summit came to a close, Lyra and Thomas found themselves standing together on the observation deck once more. The stars outside were as beautiful as ever, but this time, they didn't feel so distant. They were no longer just two individuals from different worlds. They were partners, facing the future together. Thomas looked at Lyra, his heart filled with a mixture of love and fear.
"No matter what happens, I'm glad we have each other," he said quietly. Lyra smiled, her eyes meeting his. "And you, Thomas, together, we will change the course of history." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity for both Thomas and Lyra. Their union, once a quiet wish whispered in the dark, was now out in the open. The galaxy, with its many races and civilizations, was watching, waiting for them to make their next move. For Thomas, the weight of the responsibility felt heavier than he had ever imagined. Lyra, as always, remained calm, her demeanor unwavering. But Thomas could see the quiet determination in her eyes, and it gave him the strength he needed to continue. Despite the political challenges that loomed over them, Thomas and Lyra spent as much time together as possible. In those quiet moments, when they were alone, they spoke of their hopes, their fears, and their dreams for the future. They shared stories of their pasts, Lyra of her royal upbringing, her responsibilities, and the sacrifices she had made for her people. Thomas, in turn, spoke of his life as a diplomat, the long hours of negotiation, and the times he had felt isolated in his work. But in each other they had found a kindred spirit. They both understood what it meant to sacrifice for the greater good, and they both knew that their union would require even greater sacrifices. One evening, as the two sat together in a quiet corner of the palace, Lyra turned to Thomas with a serious expression. "We must prepare for what's to come," she said, her voice soft but filled with urgency. "There are those who will not accept this union. Some of my people will resist, and there are factions in the galaxy who will see this as a threat. They will not allow it to happen without a fight." Thomas nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "I know," he said quietly, "but we've already made our decision. We can't back down now. We have to be ready to face whatever comes our way."
Lyra reached out and took his hand.
"And we will face it together. Whatever happens, Thomas, you are not alone. I won't let you face this battle on your own." Her words were a comfort to him, but deep down, Thomas knew that their path would not be easy. As much as they had hoped for peace and understanding, there were forces in the galaxy that would never accept their relationship. It wasn't just about politics, it was about fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change. And change was what Thomas and Lyra represented. Their union, though filled with hope, was also a challenge to the status quo. It would force others to confront their biases, their prejudices, and their understanding of what it meant to be united. As the days passed, the tension grew. Rumors spread like wildfire, and the media, both human and alien, had a field day with the story of the human diplomat and the alien princess. Some hailed it as a breakthrough, a sign of hope for the future. Others saw it as a dangerous precedent, one that could threaten the balance of power in the galaxy. One of the first challenges they faced came from the Lyrian Council, Lyra's own people.
While some members of the council supported their union, many others were vehemently opposed. They argued that the marriage was a political move, that Lyra was weakening her position by marrying a human, someone who could never truly understand her people's ways. The council believed that Lyra's duty was to her people, and that by marrying outside her race, she was betraying the very ideals she had spent her life defending. The council meeting was tense. Lyra sat at the head of the table, her posture regal, but her face a mask of calm determination. Thomas sat beside her, trying his best to remain composed, even as the council members turned their gaze toward him with suspicion. One of the council members, an elderly man with sharp eyes, spoke first. "Princess Lyra, you are the future of our people. This union with a human diplomat may be seen as an insult to our traditions."
How can you expect us to accept this alliance when it goes against everything we stand for?
Lyra didn't flinch. "I understand your concerns," she said, her voice steady. "But this union is not a betrayal. It is a step toward a new future, one where we can build bridges with those who are different from us. The galaxy is changing, and if we are to survive and thrive, we must adapt."
We must learn to trust each other. The council member scoffed. Trust?
With a human? Our people have no place for such unions.
You risk everything, Princess. Your position, our future, all for this human.
Thomas felt a surge of frustration, but remained silent, sensing that this was Lyra's battle to fight. He knew that she had been raised for moments like this, moments when her authority and strength would be tested. He could only offer his support. Lyra's gaze hardened.
I am not asking for your approval, she said firmly. I am asking for your understanding.
We are all part of the same galaxy, and if we are to coexist peacefully, we must learn to accept each other. My marriage to Thomas is not just for us, it is for all of us. It is a symbol of what can be achieved when we let go of our fear and embrace the possibility of unity. The room fell silent. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind outside, carrying the faint hum of distant ships. Then, one by one, the council members began to speak, their voices softer now, though the tension was still palpable.
I do not agree with this union,
said another council member, a younger woman with dark hair.
But I see the wisdom in your words, Princess. If this is what you believe is right, then I will not stand in your way.
Another council member nodded. Perhaps we have been too quick to judge. The galaxy is indeed changing. Perhaps this union will lead to greater understanding between our people and the humans. Lyra nodded, her expression softening.
Thank you, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. This is not an easy decision, and I know that many of you still have doubts.
But I ask you to trust in me, and in the future, we are building together.
The meeting ended with mixed reactions, but Lyra had secured a victory.
Though there were still many who opposed their union, there were others who had begun to see its potential. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As they left the council chamber, Thomas turned to Lyra, his heart filled with admiration. You handled that well, he said, his voice filled with respect. Lyra smiled, though there was a weariness in her eyes. It's only the beginning, she replied.
There will be many more battles ahead, but we must face them, Thomas.
We cannot allow fear to control us. We must stand together. Over the next few weeks, their relationship continued to be tested. Rumors of rebellion spread throughout the galaxy, and factions within both human and alien groups began to stir. There were whispers of sabotage, of attempts to undermine their union before it could fully take root. But through it all, Thomas and Lyra remained steadfast. They knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but they also knew that their love, their commitment to each other and to the future they hoped to build, would be the force that carried them through. One night, as they sat together in the quiet of Lyra's chambers, Thomas looked at her, his heart full. I don't know if I can do this without you, he said quietly. Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with warmth. "You are not alone, Thomas. We are in this together, always." And as they sat there, hand in hand, they both knew that no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. Together, they would change the course of history. The days grew heavier as the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see how Thomas and Lyra would navigate the uncertain path ahead. The news of their union had spread beyond the walls of the summit, reaching every corner of the galaxy. Some people embraced the idea of unity between species, seeing it as a hopeful sign of peace. But others, especially those who valued tradition and control, viewed it as a threat to the established order. For Thomas and Lyra, the stakes had never been higher. Their relationship had become a symbol, not just of their love for one another, but of the future they wished to create. But with that symbol came the weight of expectation, of fear, and of political maneuvering that neither of them had anticipated. As they prepared for the next step in their journey, they both knew that the challenges would only grow more difficult. Lyra had always been prepared for the political battles that came with her royal status. She had been trained from a young age to be a leader, to make difficult decisions, and to shoulder the burdens of her people. But the struggle she now faced was different. It wasn't just about politics or strategy. It was about her heart. It was about standing up for what she believed in, even when the consequences were uncertain. And it was about the man she had chosen to stand beside her. Thomas, too, had always prided himself on his diplomatic skills. He had spent his career negotiating peace, brokering deals, and maintaining calm in the face of adversity. But this was different. This was personal. It wasn't just about representing his people. It was about protecting the woman he loved. And that, more than anything, was what scared him. The idea of losing her, of failing to protect what they had built together, weighed heavily on his mind. One evening, as the two sat in the quiet of Lyra's private chambers, the tension between them felt palpable. It wasn't the tension of disagreement or anger, but the tension of two people who knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. They had already faced so much together, but there was more to come. And they both knew that the galaxy would not make it easy for them. "I never imagined it would be like this," Thomas said, his voice soft as he looked out the window at the stars. "I thought it would be simple, just two people coming together, putting aside the differences between us, and finding a way to make it work. But it's so much more complicated." Lyra turned to him, her expression thoughtful.
It was never going to be easy, Thomas. When two worlds collide, it's never simple.
But we knew that going in. We knew that this union would challenge everything, both for us and for the people we represent. Thomas nodded, his mind racing. But what if we can't make it work? What if the galaxy refuses to accept us? What if the people can't see past their differences? Lyra walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We can't control the galaxy, Thomas. We can't make everyone see things our way. But we can control how we respond. We can show them that love, understanding, and cooperation are possible, even between two very different worlds. And if we do that, then perhaps we will change the galaxy, one person at a time." Her words were like a balm to his troubled mind. It wasn't about pleasing everyone, he realized. It was about staying true to their beliefs, to their love for each other, and to the vision they shared for a better future. He had always known that peace was fragile, that it could be torn apart by fear and hatred, but he had also always believed that peace was worth fighting for. The days that followed were filled with tense meetings, debates, and preparations for the next phase of their journey. Lyra's people were divided, with some factions fiercely opposing her decision to marry a human, while others supported it as a symbol of progress and unity. There were whispers of rebellion in the air, and rumors began to spread that some of the more radical members of the galaxy's political factions were planning to make a move against them. But Lyra and Thomas were not deterred. They knew that they had to stand strong, not just for their own sake, but for the future they wanted to build. And so they continued to push forward, working together to navigate the political landscape and calm the growing tensions. One afternoon, as they were preparing for another meeting with the council, Thomas found himself alone in a quiet room, his thoughts once again turning to the enormity of the task before them. It had been weeks since their engagement had been made public, and the pressure had only increased with each passing day. He had expected resistance, but the magnitude of the backlash was something he had not fully prepared for. He had always been a diplomat, someone who could read people, understand their needs, and find common ground. But this was different. This was about his own heart, his own future. And as much as he tried to focus on the bigger picture, he couldn't help but feel a deep, personal fear that the galaxy would never accept them. He had always told himself that love was the answer to everything, that it was the key to peace, to understanding, to the future. But now, standing here, he wondered if love alone was enough. Could it truly overcome the political forces that were working against them? Could it withstand the fear, the hatred, and the prejudice that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day? The door to the room opened quietly, and Lyra stepped inside, her presence filling the space with a calm, almost serene energy. She smiled as she saw him standing there, lost in thought. "Thomas," she said softly, her voice gentle but filled with a quiet strength. "You are thinking too much." Thomas smiled weakly, but his heart still felt heavy. "I can't help it, Lyra."
There's so much at stake. I keep wondering if we're doing the right thing.
"If we can really make this work." Lyra walked over to him, her eyes filled with understanding.
I know it's hard, but we knew from the beginning that this would not be easy.
The galaxy is not ready for what we are trying to do, but that does not mean we should give up. If we believe in each other, in what we can accomplish together, then nothing else matters. The rest of the galaxy will have to follow our lead. Her words, simple as they were, filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. Lyra was right. They couldn't control the opinions of others, but they could control their actions. They could show the galaxy that love, no matter how unlikely, could bring people together. As they prepared to face the council once again, Thomas felt a sense of clarity settle over him. It didn't matter what the galaxy thought. It didn't matter what anyone else said. What mattered was that they believed in each other, and that they were willing to fight for the future they wanted to build together. And so, with Lyra by his side, Thomas stepped into the council chamber, ready to face whatever came their way. The galaxy would not be kind to them, but they had one another. And that, he realized, was all they needed. As the council members began to speak, the usual hostility in the air was thick, but this time, it didn't affect Thomas. He had found his strength, his resolve in the love he shared with Lyra. And with that love, he knew that no matter how hard the road ahead might be, they would face it together. As the council session drew to a close, the tension in the room began to lift. The debate was far from over. But for the first time, Thomas and Lyra felt hopeful. They had taken the first step, and they would continue to walk forward, side by side, toward a future where love and peace could thrive. And in that moment, surrounded by the weight of their responsibilities, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united, strong, and determined to change the course of history.